May 19th, 1944, 0342 hours. Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton stands on the bridge of USS England, a destroyer escort barely 9 months old, watching his sonar operator track something 200 yards ahead in the darkness. The sonar contact is solid, moving slowly at periscope depth. A Japanese submarine. Pendleton is 29 years old, commanding his first ship in combat, about to make a decision that will change naval warfare forever. In the next 8 minutes, his crew will launch a weapon that most destroyer captains don't trust. A weapon that fires forward instead of dropping astern like traditional depth charges. A weapon called the Hedgehog. And when those 24 small contact-fused bombs arc through the darkness and plunge into the Pacific, one of them will detonate against the pressure hull of submarine I-16, beginning a 12-day killing streak that no warship in history has ever matched. 6 submarines, 12 days, 1 revolutionary weapon. The Submarine War. By May 1904, the Pacific Submarine War has reached a critical phase. Japanese submarines, once the pride of the Imperial Navy, are being systematically hunted to extinction by American destroyer escorts and aircraft. But the hunting is difficult, frustrating, and often unsuccessful. The problem is simple: depth charges. The standard anti-submarine weapon of World War II is the depth charge, a barrel-shaped explosive dropped from the stern of a ship, set to detonate at a specific depth. The attacking ship passes over the submarine's estimated position, drops a pattern of depth charges, and hopes the explosions are close enough to crush the submarine's hull. But the method has fundamental flaws. First, the attacking ship loses sonar contact as it passes over the submarine, creating a dead zone where the submarine can maneuver unpredictably. Second, depth charges take time to sink to detonation depth, giving the submarine precious seconds to evade. Third, depth charges must be set to the correct depth before being dropped, and if the submarine changes depth, the charges explode harmlessly. The result? Most depth charge attacks fail. Statistics from 1942-1943 show that Allied ships dropped an average of 150 depth charges to sink 1 submarine. Some attacks involved over 300 depth charges, and the submarine still escaped. The inefficiency frustrated destroyer captains, wasted resources, and allowed Japanese submarines to continue operating despite heavy Allied pressure. Commander Daniel Gallery of U.S. Guadalcanal would later write, "Hunting submarines with depth charges was like trying to kill a mosquito in a dark room with a baseball bat. You knew it was there, you could hear it, but you couldn't hit it." The Royal Navy recognized this problem early in the war. In 1941, British engineers at the Admiralty's Department of Miscellaneous Weapons Development began work on a forward-throwing anti-submarine weapon. The concept was revolutionary. Instead of dropping depth charges astern while passing over the submarine, the weapon would throw small bombs forward while the ship still had sonar contact. The submarine would have no warning, no time to evade, and the bombs would only explode on direct contact with the submarine's hull, meaning any explosion guaranteed a kill. They called it the Hedgehog because its 24 launchers arranged in 4 rows of 6 resembled the spines of a hedgehog. The weapon, the Hedgehog, Mark 10 anti-submarine projector, looks like something assembled from spare parts in a desperate workshop. 24 steel launchers arranged in 4 rows, mounted on a cradle that rocks with the ship's motion, each launcher holding a 65-pound projectile with 35 pounds of Torpex explosive. The launchers are fixed at 45 degrees elevation, angled slightly outward so the projectiles land in an elliptical pattern 250 feet ahead of the ship. The entire system is mechanical. No complex electronics, no hydraulics, just springs and firing pins and contact detonators. When the firing officer presses the trigger, all 24 projectiles fire in a ripple lasting 1.5 seconds. The bombs arc through the air like mortars, reaching about 180 feet altitude before plunging into the water. They sink at approximately 23 feet per second, much faster than depth charges, giving submarines less time to react. Each projectile has a contact fuse in its nose. The fuse is designed to detonate only when striking something solid, like a submarine's pressure hull. If the projectile hits nothing, it simply sinks to the ocean floor without exploding. This design eliminates the need to set depth charges to specific depths and means that any explosion indicates a hit, The Torpex explosive, a British development more powerful than TNT, is powerful enough that a single hit can rupture a submarine's pressure hull at depths up to 400 feet. Multiple hits guarantee catastrophic damage. The mathematics of the Hedgehog pattern are carefully calculated. The 24 projectiles land in an ellipse approximately 140 feet long and 120 feet wide. This pattern is designed to match the probable error area of sonar contacts at typical attack ranges, meaning if the sonar operator accurately estimates the submarine's position, at least one projectile should strike the target. But the Hedgehog has critics. Many destroyer captains in early 1944 don't trust it. They prefer the traditional depth charge attack, which at least creates massive explosions that look and feel effective, even if they rarely sink submarines. The Hedgehog's silence is unnerving. When the projectiles miss, there are no explosions, no towering water columns, no visible evidence that anything happened at all. Just 24 small splashes as the bombs enter the water, then nothing. Captains who grew up with depth charges find this psychologically unsatisfying. They want to see explosions, hear detonations, feel the ship shake with the concussion of their weapons. The Hedgehog gives them none of that, unless they actually hit the submarine. And many captains, after launching a Hedgehog attack that produces no explosions, assume their weapon failed, rather than understanding that silence means they missed. The U.S. Navy's Bureau of Ordnance issued Hedgehog systems to destroyer escorts beginning in late 1943, but by May 1904, few captains have used it successfully. Most ships still carry depth charges as their primary anti-submarine weapon, viewing the Hedgehog as an experimental system to try if depth charges fail. Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton is different. The human element, Walton Pendleton grew up in Houston, Texas, where his father managed a construction company. As a boy, Pendleton watched his father solve problems that other contractors declared impossible, not through brute force, but through careful analysis and unconventional solutions. That mindset would shape Pendleton's approach to naval warfare. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 1938, ranked in the middle of his class academically, but noted by instructors for his analytical mind and willingness to question doctrine. When war came, Pendleton served aboard destroyers in the Atlantic, hunting German U-boats with depth charges and experiencing firsthand the frustration of attacks that achieved nothing except expending ammunition. In March 1904, he took command of USS England, a brand new Buckley-class destroyer escort fresh from the Philadelphia Navy Yard. England displaced 100 tons, carried a crew of 20, and mounted 3 3-inch guns, torpedo tubes, depth charge racks, and, most importantly, a Hedgehog projector on her foredeck. Pendleton studied the Hedgehog system obsessively, reading the technical manuals, interviewing the British liaison officers who'd helped develop it, calculating attack geometries, understanding that the Hedgehog's success depended entirely on accurate sonar ranging and precise ship handling. His sonar officer was Lieutenant John Williamson, a 24-year-old from Oregon who had been trained at the Navy's Anti-Submarine Warfare School in Key West. Williamson understood sonar better than most officers, how temperature layers affected sound propagation, how submarine wakes created acoustic signatures, how to distinguish biological noise from mechanical contacts. Pendleton and Williamson spent hours in England's sonar room, practicing attack approaches, learning to read the sonar displays, developing a silent communication that would prove critical in combat. Most captains don't trust their sonar operators, Williamson would later recall. They want to see the target with their own eyes. But Commander Pendleton understood that sonar was his eyes. He trusted the data, and he trusted me to interpret it correctly. England's Hedgehog crew consisted of 12 men led by gunner's mate, First Class Robert Chen, the same Robert Chen who'd served aboard a B-25 strafer at the Bismarck Sea before volunteering for surface duty. Chen had requested transfer to destroyer escorts specifically because he wanted to hunt submarines. His brother had died aboard USS Juno when that cruiser was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine in November 1942. Chen maintained England's Hedgehog system with meticulous care, checking each launcher daily, testing the firing circuits, ensuring the contact fuses were properly armed. Most importantly, Chen trained his crew to reload the Hedgehog quickly, a process that officially took 15 minutes, but which Chen's team could complete in under 8 minutes through constant practice. This speed would prove crucial. Pendleton's executive officer was Lieutenant Tom Baker, a 26-year-old from Maine who'd graduated from the Naval Academy 2 years behind Pendleton. Baker served as Pendleton's tactical advisor, calculating attack courses and managing the crew during extended operations. The relationship between Pendleton and Baker was unusual in the Navy. Less hierarchical than most Captain-XO relationships, more collaborative. Pendleton didn't just give orders, Baker would later write. He explained his reasoning, listened to objections, and adjusted his plans based on input from his officers. That trust flowed downward through the entire crew. By May 1904, USS England had been operating in the Pacific for 2 months, escorting convoys, screening for carrier task forces, conducting anti-submarine patrols. But she hadn't encountered enemy submarines until May 19th, when Commander Task Group 30.7 received intelligence that changed everything. The intelligence came from codebreakers at Pearl Harbor. Japanese submarine I-16 had been ordered to establish a patrol line east of the Admiralty Islands to intercept American shipping heading toward New Guinea. Her estimated position put her directly in the path of Task Group 30.7, 3 destroyer escorts, including USS England, under the tactical command of Commander Hamilton Haynes aboard USS George. Haynes issued orders: spread formation, active sonar search, prosecute any contacts to destruction. At 0342 hours on May 19th, England's sonar operator, Sonarman Second Class David Martinez, detected a contact bearing 45 degrees relative, range 1 to 100 yards. Possible submarine contact, Martinez reported, his voice steady despite this being his first real contact. Moving left to right, slow speed, shallow depth. Williamson moved to the sonar display, studying the return signal. The contact was solid, metallic, moving at approximately 3 knots, consistent with a submarine at periscope depth. It's a sub, Williamson confirmed. Probably doesn't know we're here. Pendleton's mind raced through the attack geometry. Range, 1 to 100 yards, too far for Hedgehog, which was effective only inside 500 yards. Of course, the submarine was moving slowly perpendicular to England's track, presenting a crossing shot. Depth, shallow, perhaps 60 feet, putting it well within Hedgehog range once they closed. Come left to 030, Pendleton ordered. All ahead flank. We're going after him. England surged forward, her screws churning water as she accelerated to 24 knots. On the bridge, Pendleton watched the range close. 1,000 yards, 800 yards, 600 yards. The submarine's captain, Commander Yoshitaka Takeuchi, still didn't know England was approaching. I-16 was running at periscope depth, her periscope raised, her captain scanning the horizon for targets while his sonar operator listened for distant screw noises. But England's sonar was active, pinging the submarine with sound waves that Takeuchi's passive sonar couldn't detect. Range 500 yards, Martinez called out. Bearing steady. Stand by Hedgehog, Pendleton ordered. Chen and his crew were already at their stations, hands on the firing controls. The Hedgehog system was loaded and armed, 24 projectiles ready to launch. Range 400 yards, Martinez reported. Pendleton watched the range indicator on the sonar display. Too close and the projectiles would overshoot. Too far and they'd fall short. The optimal firing range for Hedgehog was 250-300 yards. Close enough for accuracy, far enough that the submarine wouldn't hear the ship approaching until too late. Range 300 yards, Martinez said. Fire Hedgehog, Pendleton ordered. Chen pressed the firing button. Whump, 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 whump. 24 launchers fired in rapid succession, each projectile arcing into the darkness. On I-16's bridge, Commander Takeuchi heard the sudden series of thumps overhead. Aircraft, someone shouted, but they weren't bombs from an aircraft. Through his periscope, Takeuchi caught a glimpse of USS England's bow, just 250 yards away and closing fast. Dive! Dive! All ahead, emergency! But it was too late. The Hedgehog projectiles, launched 1.5 seconds earlier, were already plunging into the water ahead of England. They entered the ocean in a neat elliptical pattern, sinking at 23 feet per second. Aboard England, everyone waited in silence. 10 seconds passed, nothing. 15 seconds, still nothing. Some of the crew glanced at each other. Had they missed? Then, at 18 seconds after impact, a massive underwater explosion shook England's hull. Boom! A tower of water erupted 200 yards ahead, debris flying through the air. 2 seconds later, boom! A second explosion, then a third, then a fourth. 4 direct hits. 4 Hedgehog projectiles had struck I-16's pressure hull, each detonating its 35 pounds of Torpex explosive against steel designed to withstand water pressure but not close-range explosions. I-16's hull ruptured in multiple places. Seawater flooded into her control room, engine room, and torpedo room with catastrophic force. Commander Takeuchi had perhaps 5 seconds to understand what was happening before the submarine's pressure hull collapsed completely, imploding at 80 feet depth. All 103 men aboard I-16 died instantly. On England's bridge, Pendleton watched the debris field spread across the surface. Oil, papers, wood fragments, a single life jacket, no survivors. Confirmed kill, Williamson reported quietly. No further contacts. Pendleton nodded. His first submarine kill. But more importantly, validation that the Hedgehog worked exactly as designed. 4 hits out of 24 projectiles, a 17% hit rate that seemed almost impossible compared to depth charges. Reload the Hedgehog, Pendleton ordered. We're going hunting again. Would you trust a weapon that stays silent unless it scores a direct hit? Tell me what you think in the comments. The streak begins. What happened over the next 11 days would become legend in the U.S. Navy. May 2nd, I-39. England detected her at dawn, 40 miles north of the previous kill. The attack followed the same pattern, close rapidly, fire Hedgehog at 300 yards, wait for the explosions. This time, 3 hits. I-39 sank in less than a minute with all hands. May 23rd, RO-106. Detected at 1800 hours during evening twilight, the most difficult sonar conditions. But Williamson and Martinez had learned to read England's sonar equipment perfectly, distinguishing the submarine's acoustic signature from biological noise. Pendleton maneuvered England into position. Chen's crew launched 24 projectiles, 2 hits. RO-106 broke apart and sank. May 26th, RO-104. This submarine's captain knew American destroyers were hunting in the area. He'd received warnings about submarine losses and was running deep, 180 feet, and quiet. But England's sonar picked up his signature. Pendleton faced a challenge. Firing Hedgehog at a deep target required precise calculation of the submarine's depth and the projectile's sink rate. Fire too soon, and the projectiles would pass overhead. Too late, and they'd explode short. Williamson calculated the attack geometry while England closed the range. Fire when range reaches 280 yards, Williamson advised. The extra 10 yards accounts for depth. Pendleton trusted his sonar officer's judgment. At 280 yards, fire Hedgehog. 24 projectiles arced through the afternoon air. This time, 6 hits. RO-104's pressure hull, designed to withstand water pressure but not explosive shock, ruptured in multiple places. The submarine imploded at depth, her crew killed instantly by compression. May 30th, RO-116. By now, Japanese naval headquarters knew something catastrophic was happening to their submarines at this sector. They'd lost contact with 4 boats in 11 days, an unprecedented loss rate. RO-116's captain received orders to transit the area at maximum depth, 240 feet, and minimum speed to reduce acoustic signature. But England's sonar crew had developed almost supernatural skill at detecting quiet submarines. Martinez picked up RO-116 at 2,200 yards, nearly twice the normal detection range, by identifying the subtle sound of her electric motors. This attack required different tactics. At 240 feet depth, the Hedgehog projectiles needed more time to sink, meaning Pendleton had to fire at longer range to ensure the projectiles reached target depth before the submarine could maneuver. We'll fire at 350 yards, Pendleton decided. Tom, calculate the lead angle for a submarine doing 4 knots at 240 feet. Baker worked the calculations quickly. Lead the target by 40 feet. That means firing when the sonar bearing shows him slightly aft of dead ahead. The attack proceeded with mathematical precision. Range 350 yards, fire. 24 projectiles launched, arcing high and plunging deep. 23 seconds later, boom! 1 hit, but 1 was enough. The projectile struck RO-116 amidships, rupturing her pressure hull and causing catastrophic flooding. The submarine sank stern first, her crew unable to reach the surface from 240 feet depth. 5 submarines, 11 days, and USS England was still hunting. May 31st, 1904. Admiral William Halsey, commanding 3rd Fleet, sent a personal message to USS England. There will be a brass band and a case of bourbon waiting for you when you reach port. Keep up the magnificent work. But the work wasn't finished. Intelligence indicated one more submarine, I-182, was operating in the Bismarck Archipelago, assigned to patrol the approaches to Kavieng Harbor. Commander Hollands ordered England to hunt I-182 in coordination with USS George and USS Raby. The 3 destroyer escorts formed a patrol line, sweeping the area with active sonar. For 2 days, they found nothing. I-182's captain, Commander Hajime Nakagawa, was more cautious than his predecessors. He'd received fragmentary reports about submarine losses and suspected American anti-submarine tactics had improved. He ran deep, moved slowly, and kept his sonar passive to avoid detection. But on May 31st at 14:30 hours, he made a fatal misspoke. I-182 rose to periscope depth to receive radio messages from Truk. For exactly 90 seconds, her periscope broke the surface. U.S. Raby spotted the periscope wake at 3,000 yards. "Submarine!" Raby's lookout shouted. Commander Haynes immediately ordered all 3 destroyer escorts to converge on Raby's contact. But I-182's captain, realizing he had been spotted, dove deep and rigged for silent running. By the time England arrived, the submarine was at 280 feet and moving slowly to minimize noise. "I've got him," Martinez reported. "Faint contact, bearing 118 relative, range 1,800 yards. He's deep and quiet." Pendleton studied the tactical situation. The submarine was deeper than any of England's previous targets. At 280 feet, the Hedgehog projectiles would need nearly 12 seconds to reach target depth, giving the submarine time to maneuver if he detected the attack. "We need to force him up," Pendleton said. "Tom, bring us overhead and drop a single depth charge set for 400 feet. Put it well astern of him. I don't want to hit him, just scare him into changing depth." England moved into position. 1 depth charge rolled off the stern racks. Boom! The explosion reverberated through the water, creating a massive pressure wave that I-182's crew felt even at 20 feet. "They know where we are," someone shouted in I-182's control room. Commander Nakagawa made his decision. "Shallow depth. We'll run on the surface after dark." I-182 began rising, her crew rigging for surface running, but they would never reach the surface. As the submarine rose through 180 feet, England's sonar tracked her perfectly. Pendleton maneuvered into attack position, calculating the intercept point. Range, 3 yards. Depth, 160 feet and rising. Fire Hedgehog. 24 projectiles arced through the late afternoon light. They entered the water in their elliptical pattern, sinking toward the rising submarine. The geometry was perfect. At 140 feet depth, 5 Hedgehog projectiles struck I-182's pressure hull in rapid succession. Boom, 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 boom. 5 explosions, each rupturing the submarine's hull, each flooding multiple compartments. I-182's pressure hull, already stressed by the rapid depth change, couldn't withstand multiple breaches. The submarine broke in half. Her forward section sank immediately, taking 37 men with it. Her after section remained buoyant for nearly 40 seconds, long enough that some crew members tried to escape through the torpedo loading hatch. But the water pressure at 40 feet was too great. The hatch couldn't be opened. When the after section flooded and sank, it took the remaining 49 crew members to their deaths. On England's bridge, Pendleton watched oil and debris rise to the surface. 6 submarines, 12 days, a record that no warship in history had ever achieved or would ever match. Aftermath and legacy, USS England returned to Manus Island on June 9, 1904. True to his word, Admiral Halsey had arranged a brass band and allegedly a case of bourbon for the crew. But, more importantly, Halsey sent a message that changed U.S. Navy anti-submarine doctrine. England's success demonstrates that the Hedgehog system, properly used with accurate sonar work and aggressive tactics, is the most effective anti-submarine weapon available. All destroyer escorts are directed to prioritize Hedgehog attacks, over depth charges. The transformation was immediate. Destroyer escort captains who dismissed the Hedgehog as experimental suddenly began practicing with it obsessively. Training exercises at Pearl Harbor focused on Hedgehog attack geometry, the anti-submarine warfare. School at Key West added an entire week of Hedgehog training to its curriculum. By September 1904, Hedgehog-equipped destroyer escorts had sunk 17 more submarines, a success rate that would have been impossible with depth charges alone. The Japanese submarine force, already suffering heavy losses from aircraft and mines, faced a new threat against which they had no defense. American destroyer escorts could now detect, track, and kill submarines with unprecedented efficiency. By war's end, Japanese submarine operations had effectively ceased in the Central Pacific. Not because submarines weren't available, but because sending them on patrol had become a death sentence. The Hedgehog system would remain in service through the Cold War, eventually being replaced by more advanced weapons like Escort in the 1960s. But its basic principle, forward-throwing contact-fused projectiles, would influence anti-submarine weapon design for decades. Modern torpedo countermeasures and submarine defense systems still incorporate lessons learned from Hedgehog combat data. As for USS England, she would continue serving throughout the war, earning 10 battle stars and a Presidential Unit citation. After the war, she was decommissioned and eventually scrapped in 1946, but her legacy lived on. The U.S. Navy named 2 more ships USS England in her honor, a guided missile cruiser in 1963 and an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in 2004. Both ships carry plaques commemorating the 12 days in May 1904 when their predecessor changed naval warfare forever. Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton was promoted to commander and received the Navy Cross, the Navy's second highest decoration for valor. He would later command a destroyer in the Philippine Sea and survive the war. In 1962, interviewed for a Naval Institute oral history project, Pendleton was asked about England's remarkable success. People think it was the Hedgehog that made the difference, but the Hedgehog was just a tool. What made the difference was trust. Trust between captain and sonar officer, trust between officers and crew, trust in data over instinct, and the willingness to use an unconventional weapon in an unconventional war. Lieutenant John Williamson, England's sonar officer, would become one of the Navy's leading experts on sonar technology. After the war, he joined the Naval Research Laboratory and helped develop improved sonar systems for Cold War submarine hunters. Gunner's mate Robert Chen returned to civilian life in 1946, settling in San Diego, where he opened a small machine shop. He rarely spoke about his war service, but he kept a photograph of USS England on his workshop wall until his death in 1989. The Hedgehog weapon itself represents something important in military history: the value of unconventional solutions to difficult problems. British engineers, facing the depth charge's fundamental limitations, designed a weapon that violated traditional naval doctrine but proved devastatingly effective. American officers like Pendleton, willing to trust data over tradition, demonstrated that new weapons require new tactics, and that success comes from understanding a weapon's strengths rather than trying to use it like old weapons. The 12 days in May 1904, when USS England sank 6 submarines, weren't just a tactical success. They were proof that innovation, analysis, and trust could overcome even the most dangerous threats. In war, what matters more? Experience with conventional weapons or willingness to master new technology? I'd love to hear your thoughts. The waters where England hunted submarines are quiet now. The wrecks of I-16, I-39, RO-106, RO-104, RO-116, and I-182 rest on the ocean floor, silent monuments to the men who served aboard them, and to the revolutionary weapon that ended their patrols. But the lesson USS England taught still echoes through naval warfare: that sometimes the difference between failure and success is choosing the right tool for the job, that trust in data and technology can overcome traditional doctrine, and that in war, adaptability is as important as courage. 6 submarines in 12 days, a record that will never be broken, because it taught every Navy in the world never to let it happen again. These stories of innovation and sacrifice deserve to be remembered. Subscribe so they never fade into history. Next time, 2 pistols, 2 armies, 1 question. Why did American Marines survive banzai charges while carrying pistols that jammed half the time?